Okay. All right. Well, we are doing our live wildflower walk this morning on Facebook Live, and we're going to give it a minute here for everybody to kind of catch up, pop on. We wanted to start it a little early just so everybody could get on and things like that. So we are going to start it right from the beginning of the park. So as you arrive, there's parking behind us, but this is the trailhead area of our park of Pellett Memorial Woods. So and also in we have a brochure box that has our county brochure and also a spring wildflower brochure. So any of the species you see in here today, there is more information and pictures of them in the brochure. So when you get here to come explore on your own, definitely stop at the box, pick up one of those if you want a little bit more to see as you go along. Pellett Memorial Woods was dedicated as a state preserve. So when we talk about state parks in the state, we have state parks and then we have state preserves, which are a little bit higher up in the protection of the land. And Frank Pellett was also one of our first apiarists and beekeepers for the state. And here on this land, he used it for over 40 years for nature study and some of his studies with honeybees and things like that. So he managed this area for the wildflowers. We continue that today. It became a state preserve in the 1980s. And so since then we have managed it for the Iowa DNR. And so it also, since we manage it, we have a management agreement, and then again, it's a state preserve. So it has lots of different protections or lots of things in that management agreement that we can or can't do. And like we would be able to do in other parks, again, because it's a state preserve. When we talk about managing it, we talk about managing it for the wildflowers that you're going to see today. The woodland wildflowers need that early spring sunlight. So you'll see, the leaves aren't on the trees yet. And when the leaves aren't on the trees, those woodland wildflowers can bloom. So we, when we are walking, you'll see that in certain parts of the park, we have not been able to get some of the, what we call the understory out. So when you look at the front part of this park, we actually just did it. And so we took out the invasive honeysuckle that has been in here that creates shading and an early understory and would shade out our wildland woodflowers. So when we go in, we're actually gonna not go very far because since we've helped out this understory just kind of go away so that they can still get that sunlight. A lot of our woodland wildflowers have popped up here. And some of them today are not blooming right next to the sign. We try to put the signs where there is the best chance of seeing that woodland wildflower. And so today, there's going to be a couple times that we're not by a sign, but that's where we're going to talk about that wildflower because it's there, it's blooming. So let's head in and get to our first wildflower. So the first one I'm going to talk about is probably one you have in your backyard. It is this one right here. It's the purple blooms. It is the Woodland Violet, and it does bloom as early as April and into June, and it is in this clumping formation, and then it can also be purple or yellow, so you may see yellow flowers in here of the woodland violets. We are going to talk about it when we talk about each species. We're going to talk about if the Native Americans used it, or if they have some sort of Native American use, things like that. They considered this one a blood purifier, and they would make it into tea. You can eat the leaves as greens, and you can even pick the flower and boil it in sugar. It's actually very good. So that is Woodland Violet. And I'm not going to go very far here. Hold on. We've got one that I usually don't talk about. We've had kind of an early spring this year. And this one right here is Sweet William. So you might recognize this one too, because we still have Sweet Williams today in our perennial gardens. And then that 5 petals of purple of a flower. And then you can see that these leaves are right across from each other. And so we talk about that Sweet Williams, or blue flock sometimes. Again, they're kind of a colony patching grower, and they can get taller than this. So it's early still. This is one that we usually have. This is a late into May, into June one. I've actually only talked about this one probably once in the last 10 years. It usually doesn't bloom until a little bit later in May. So we are having a little bit of an early spring. So some of these some of these are starting to bloom, and some of the ones today will go right past the sign. They've probably either already bloomed or they're a summer bloom. So it can get taller than this, can get up to 30 inches tall. And then there is a prairie version of Sweet William, and it gets a darker purple. And so we talk about that. The sign actually for Sweet William is way in the back of the park. And there usually is some there, but we found this perfect first example up here in the front. So we thought we'd talk about it now. Step in and talk about my favorite one. Now, some of these will close at night. So some of these you're seeing that are not fully open right now. Some of them actually close at night and open again in the morning. And again, this is 9 a.m. It's a little bit of a dewy morning. And so some of these are still closed. This one, this poor guy, I swear he had leaves when we saw him earlier this week. Somebody ate his leaves. But if you go over here and look at this one, here's the 2 leaves. It is called Trout Lily, and that's because when it was discovered, they thought that the leaves with the mottling looked like brook trout. And so Trout Lily name kind of stuck. It's also called Dogtooth Violet, so it kind of has 2 names. So you'll see that there's 2 leaves here, and then here's our little flower that's going to open up, and then so this one is even starting to open, and so is this one starting to open. It is shiny and mottled, but it also has can be in wildflower gardens. It is cultivated for use, but you'll see that there's 2 leaves here. That means it's going to have a flower. And so if you find another one, like this one over here, it's only 1 leaf. This is a first-year plant. Same way with this guy over here. First-year plant, it's not going to bloom this year. It needs to have the 2 leaves, and then it'll grow the little shoot for the flower, for the stem for the flower. So 2 leaves, it's going to bloom. I love this one. It's one of the cool ways. It's pollinated by ants, and it really needs rich woods, so rich soil, and then it also needs that filtered light coming in. And again, this one is finicky. In places, we might not have it where we used to have it because of our I should say shrub or understory problem that we're trying to keep managed at a place. Yeah, you can They did use the leaves. The Native Americans did use them in their medicine and things like that. That one's the brook, or I'm sorry, the trout lily. That one's trout lily. I'm gonna find my Dutchmans Breeches that I wanted to kind of talk about. That one's kind of. He was right here. Okay. We will still use this one anyway. I'm gonna move some things. This one just happens not to be blooming by the sign right now, but this one is Dutchmans Breeches. So there is all the little flowers. It will bloom April to May. So you could kind of see these ones are starting to get a little bit wasted and shriveled up a little bit more. So Dutchman, and if you think, well, these Dutchman's Breeches look like bleeding hearts that you might have at your house. They are in the same family. They're also in the poppy family. And they can be a little bit tinged pink of a white flower. And so the Indians, also the Native Americans, used it for the roots. The roots are technically poisonous, but they used it on their skin. You would make it into poultice on their skin and things like that. So that one is Dutchman's Breeches, and you'll see some other. Oh, here's another good example. That's probably the one I wanted to use. So again, very fern-like leaf, and then pops up that stem full of little Dutchman's Breeches. It's named because it looks like on a clothesline a bunch of women's pants or petioles and breeches as well, hanging on a line. All right, we are going to talk about another one. We'll go a little bit further. This one is called, and this one is open right now. This one is called thwart, and it's got the white flowers, and then the flowers kind of shoot up from a stem with 3 leaves, and then it has 3 segments of leaves, and then the 5 segments on the actual leaf are deeply toothed. So this is thwart. The Native Americans didn't really have any uses for it, but the pioneers would dig it up, and there is fleshy tubers as roots, and they would use it like potatoes. And so there are more than one kind of thwart, but this one is the cut leaf thwart. All right. Yeah. Take over here to one actually by the sign. And we're going to talk about May apple. There's the sign for it, but this is May apple, and it's not quite blooming, but I wanted to kind of mention it today. It is, so this part is the part that will bloom, and kind of have a hanging little yellowish white flower. And then after it flowers, this part will turn into a little apple. It'll look like a little apple, and that's how it got its name, because it actually blooms in May usually. It's in the barberry family. Can get this tall. I mean, it can even get a little bit taller, maybe 18 inches. And so it's got a little bit of a tooth to it on the leaf, deeply veined, big leaf as well. And the flowers really smell pretty too when all these start blooming. So you kind of see this is a pretty good colony of May apple. We actually, the Potawatomis would use this one on snake bites. And then we actually still use this in research today with warts and anti-tumor research right now. We're still using May apple. All right, we're going to hike a little bit to our next sign and go into the park a little further. We're going to talk about this one right by the sign. You were paying attention a little bit. Probably already saw it in this park. They are a little bit what you would want to call prolific. The prairie trilliums are. They are also called sometimes toadstool trilliums as well. And the roots, so some of these are not blooming yet, but then like this one is a blooming one. Blooms purple. It gets very tall. So when we talk about other trilliums, this one is a very tall version. Trillium is named because of the 3 leaves and the tri. And so we talk about that it does colony grow, so you get to have a bigger patch of it. But then it has that maroon brownish flower to it, versus snow trillium, which is already done blooming, is white. And colony grows as well. The Native Americans used the roots of this plant as well. So prairie trillium. This next one, the sign is a little bit far off the trail. It's for Virginia bluebells, and the bluebells right now are even behind the sign as well. So I'm going to go stand next to the bluebells. Bluebells really are a little bit of a delicate, or a little bit more of a delicate flower. They can wilt easily. We were out here one of the days that it was really chilly in the mornings, and this same plant was like shriveled up. It hadn't bloomed yet, but it was very shriveled up. So there's the bluebell, or that trumpet look of that purplish blue flower. When they're closed, they kind of look purple. You can kind of see that. The leaves are alternate. And then it has a very short season. We talk about that they can pop up as early as March. I had a friend that hers popped up pretty early before the ones in here even started to come up. So they will tolerate popping up early, and they'll just stay closed and when it's way too chilly for them. But they're really done by May, and into May, and they will completely disappear. You'll see that there's lots of them right here. They will be gone. You will not be able to see that this little plant was here when you come back in July or June, things like that. The pioneers thought, and it looks a lot like there's a plant in Europe called lungwort, and they tried to use them for the same properties that they could use lungwort for, and they've realized that these little bluebells have no properties, none of those kind of medicine properties to them, but they're very, very cute and pretty. They're fun to watch. The bees kind of fly up in there and hold on and try to get into that trumpet-like flower. But yeah, you'll come back here and you won't even be able to tell that those bluebells were here. All right, the next one. Feel free to drop questions in the live if you have it as we go. All right, we're going to talk about wild leek, and if you were, again, looking in some of the other landscapes where we were earlier, you'll see that these are all over too. These are one of the first things to come up as well. And they are considered a wildflower, but they're actually not blooming yet. They actually bloom June into July, but they're the first thing that comes up, and a lot of deer will chew on them as well. But if you could have smell-o-vision right now, you would be smelling the strong smell of onion and in the dirt and things like that, because again, they're in that garlic family. They're also, sometimes you'll hear them called ramps or wild ramps, but the flower will be a whitish yellow under here, and there's a bulb down there like the leeks you could buy in the store. And then of course the leaves are used in seasoning, and the bulb as well. One of the things the Native Americans used it for was that they would pull it up. Of course they could eat the bulb if they wanted to, but they would also crush it up and use it on bug stings that they got as well. So very, very prolific. We actually haven't seen too much lately of the deer or any of the rabbits eating them too much, but they've been eating some of the other wildflowers in here. Like we saw with the dogtooth violet, they'll eat the dogtooth violet leaves as well. All right. I am going to stop at my blue cohosh sign. This is one we don't always talk about. Again, we're having kind of a, some of these bloom into May, and they're already blooming. Not a, super amazing flower, but it's kind of a greenish yellow right there, and there's one over here as well. It's kind of that greenish yellow, and they just started blooming. We were just talking about, like, Monday we were out here, they weren't blooming yet. But this is blue cohosh. It can get a little bit taller than this too, and so one of the ways to tell that it's blue cohosh is that it has 9. So you want to count, it looks like little 3 leaflets here, and another 3, and there should be 9 total on that one leaf coming off. It can get up to 3 feet tall, and it also, again, this name, bluish purple, a bluish purple stem. It got 8 over there. That one's got 8. So, it is in the Burberry family as well. All right. We're gonna go to one in the next one. So we were out here earlier in the week, and we had decided, this one was another one, kind of like Mayapple, and it's not quite blooming yet. And so here's the flower. It's called wild ginger, and here's the leaves, and then right down here is the flower that should bloom. We haven't been able to really find any that are blooming quite yet, but we still wanted to kind of talk about it. It's got this dark green, and it's a very heart-shaped leaf, very hairy. You can see it's looks so soft and fuzzy. If I say, again, kind of like wild leek, it's just has that ginger smell, and it is exactly what it sounds like. It's wild ginger, the root and things like that, but you have to cook it, because otherwise, if it's not cooked, it is toxic. So we talk about some of these. The Chippewa used it as a root tea. They would take out the root, and they would make it into a tea with this one as well. And I will show you, I got a picture. Has there been any of what it should look like? So there's that little purple flower that we're looking for when that bud opens up. Any questions as we go along? We only have about 2 left to talk about. That is up and moving, or up and blooming, I should say. So we'll go to the next one. This is one that likes to get ate too. It's right next to the sign. There's a ton next to the sign, of course. But these little long skinny leaves, for some reason, like to get ate by the rabbits and the deer. They get about this is about as tall as they get, about 6 inches. You can see that it's not open yet. This one kind of looks purple when it's not open. This is one that it likes to close at night. If we go to this one back here, it's a little bit more in the sun. They've opened a little bit more for us. It's called Spring Beauty. It's in the purslane family. Also sometimes called wild potato. But by late June, these are all gone. They disappear. And you can actually, of course, since the other name for it is wild potato, that tubers down here, when you pull it up, those tubers you can actually eat. But the wildlife likes to browse on this one as well. But very, very dainty, and it's kind of all over in here too. Great to have all over in here. All right, question. Got one more. We're gonna hike to that one. Like I said, if you come here other parts of the time, some of these bloom in the summer, and our brochure says which ones are the summer blooms as well. So you can come in here all the way into 4th of July and past 4th of July and see flowers blooming in here. So, you know, you're probably seeing me blow past a couple of these signs. We have our trees marked in here as well. And we have our native shrubs that are marked. And then all of these wildflowers are marked. And actually we have new signs coming as well. So we'll be doing some updating into this park as well in the near future. So here's the sign for our last one that we're going to talk about today. It's called Jack in the Pulpit. But we're actually going to step a couple more steps and see some examples of Jack in the Pulpit. And this one is a kind of a young one. There. It is in the Calla family. It's also called Indian turnip. And it can be, so this is the part that is like the flower. You'd have to, here, come around and look at this one. This one you can see the flower a little bit better on. And see that greenish purple and brown, purplish brown. That's the actual part of the flower. And so the root is not edible. Can be used for medicine. The Meskwaki Indians, this is one of my favorite stories to tell. The Meskwaki Indians actually would cook meat, take the fresh root out, and put it in there of the Jack in the Pulpit. And then they would leave it for their enemies, hoping that they would find the fresh meat all nice and cooked, but it would make them sick. And so those Meskwaki Indians, they were pretty sneaky. And so some of these are very, very new, kind of just popping up. They were not here probably just over a week ago. They were all still kind of curled up. I was seeing if there was another one or not. But that one is Jack in the Pulpit. So the leaves, because you can't really kind of see the leaves very well
on this one either, because they are so new. Yeah, but the leaves will get bigger, and you'll still see the flower. It will flower into June on that one. All right, any last questions so far? Well, thanks for joining us on our wildflower walk. I know we would have rather had an actual program and have you guys all out here and really take in all of our bird sounds and all the things that are going on out here. But feel free to come back out here at your own leisure and see the wildflowers. We've kind of have tried to show you around the whole trail almost, and things like that. And we'll be out here a lot more in the next couple weeks with our new signs and some of the things that we're going to be doing out here as well. So we look forward to having you guys enjoy the parks right now, get out and hike, things like that. So again, if you're watching this on the replay, still leave us questions if you have them, because we will pop on and we'll answer them as we get them. All right, thanks guys.